6. House of Wax. Sharon Jean gave me a new nickname, Mopey. I moped around the house. I moped when I cooked and did the dishes. I moped when I worked in the garden. I went to work and moped there too. I'm not sure why. I loved Josh, of course, but it seemed like I was having an extreme reaction to his absence. It hadn't been a surprise. We'd been talking about it for months. It didn't make any sense. We were solid. I knew he'd be back someday. It's the accumulation of everything, Sharon Jean said. Dad getting killed. Mom taking off. Then the old folks dying. One damned thing after another. Maybe Josh leaving was just the last straw. That sounded logical, but it didn't improve my disposition. My chronic bad mood was getting on Sharon Jean's nerves, and her stoic if cynical determination got on mine. It got to the point where we couldn't stand to be around each other, so I stayed in my bedroom when I didn't have chores. I checked the mail every day, hoping for a letter from Josh. Nothing. He said he'd write to me, I said on one of the rare occasions when Sharon Jean and I crossed paths. They don't let them write for the first few weeks, she said. Everybody knows that. I didn't know it. When will he be allowed to? I'm not sure. I thought you knew everything, she smirked, just when I was on the verge of missing you. That's the way it went for a couple of weeks. It was nice to have Josh's truck, but it was short-lived. On the second Saturday after Josh left, the truck started up just great for the drive to work. It was a different story for the drive home. When I turned the key in the ignition, the engine turned over repeatedly without starting. I ran the battery down in the process and had to have the truck towed into a shop. I waited in an office across from a row of vending machines while a mechanic ran some diagnostics. He found me a half-hour later. It looks like a bad timing chain, he said. How much is that going to cost? I asked him. More than the truck is worth, probably. He suggested selling it for scrap. Josh was in boot camp quarantine, so I called his folks to ask them what I should do. Do what the man said, Mr. Atkins advised. Scrap the truck and put the money in your college fund. That's what Josh would tell you to do. So I did. Nothing unusual would have happened if Sharon Jean hadn't conned me into going out that night. I had just laid down and was settling in for a quiet night of reading when Sharon Jean barged into my room. Get up and pick out some clothes. We're going out. She was assertive. I recognized that tone and knew not to argue when she got like this. What's the occasion? I asked. We're going to see Fight Club. Of course, I thought she meant the movie with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. Nothing else even entered my mind. And she knew I would think that. It was one of my favorites. It seemed odd that the movie was playing somewhere more than 20 years after its release. Maybe the student center at the college where Sharon Jean was taking her nursing classes? They only showed older movies. I didn't ask. The less talk, the better. I went to the closet and looked through my clothes. I put on an old pair of cargo pants, a faded Nirvana t-shirt, and a gray hoodie in case it got chilly. She came out of her room wearing super short denim shorts, a scandalous red halter top, cowboy boots, and a white straw cowboy hat. She looked at me and said, "You're really wearing that? It's just a movie, right? I'm not trying to impress anybody." "Okay," she said, like it was the biggest mistake of my life. Far from it. My biggest mistake was yet to come. We got into our beat-up Toyota, Sharon Jean behind the wheel, and headed down the hollow. She turned north onto US 23 as we did when we went to Pikeville. Just north of Dorton, Sharon Jean took an exit that we'd never taken before. I wondered where they'd have a movie theater in that neck of the woods. We made a right turn, a left, a right, and another right. I was lost after that. I had no clue where we were. It could have been Virginia, for all I knew. Elkhorn City? No, they didn't have a movie theater. When we pulled into the mouth of a hollow even more secluded than Lawson Branch, I realized Sharon Jean hadn't been truthful. "Where are we going again?" I asked. "Too late to argue, we're there," she said. There was a field with a large pole barn, with maybe 100 cars parked in the pasture next to it. "You lied to me," I said. "No, I didn't." "You said the movie Fight Club. I said Fight Club. You assumed the movie." "I'm pretty sure you said movie." "Whatever," she said. "Here we are, Fight Club in real life. You're welcome to go home if you can get a ride from one of these randoms. I'm staying until it's over." I should have argued more, but it did feel good to be out in the world. I wasn't going to tell her that. I followed her toward the pole barn. Over the door was a hand-painted sign that said House of Wax, admission $10. There was a guy taking money just outside. Sharon Jean handed him a couple of tens, and we went in. In the middle of the building was an octagonal ring like they have in the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I'd never seen a UFC fight, but I've seen the commercials. Up against the walls were sections of old bleachers that looked like they had been repurposed after a high school gym remodel. A concession sold hot dogs and drinks. A group of boys from my school stood in a corner and passed around a pint of liquor. The males outnumbered the females 2-1. You could practically smell the testosterone. I could see why Sharon Jean wanted to come. "This is quite a setup," I said. "A guy in my chemistry class runs this," Sharon Jean said. "It's how he pays his tuition. He's going to be a millionaire someday." I did some math. Maybe 200 people at $10 a head. That was a good haul for one night. I wondered what his expenses were like. I followed Sharon Jean to the bleachers on the right. When we got to the center, we started climbing. We sat in the middle section of the bleachers in the top row. She wanted to see everyone coming and going. People wandered in. The bleachers gradually filled up. "April," someone called out. "Sharon Jean?" We looked in the direction of the voice. It was Mandy King, our neighbor from 3 houses down. She waved and made her way over. "Congratulations, April Ray." "Let me see that rock." I held out my hand so Mandy could see the ring. "It's not that big," I said. "It's more than what I've got. I'm so happy for you. Have you set a date yet?" "We're waiting until I get through school and Josh gets out." "Girl, you have a good head on your shoulders. What about you, Sharon Jean? Seeing anyone special?" "Nah, just hanging loose. It's going to be work and school until I get my nursing degree. Get a good job, snag me a doctor. That's the plan anyway." "Guess who's fighting tonight?" Mandy said. She seemed excited to spill some tea. "I give up," Sharon Jean said. "Randall Wayne Tackett." The name sounded familiar. Sharon Jean didn't react. "I hear he's having a party afterward," Mandy went on. "You girls ought to go." "We'll see," Sharon Jean said and looked at me. I shook my head. Mandy said to Sharon Jean, "Who knows? You might get lucky. He's got to settle down sometime." "I could use a little luck right now. It's been a rough patch." She wasn't lying. In some ways, our whole lives had been plagued by disaster. A young man with a microphone got into the octagon about that time. Mandy said, "It looks like it's about to start. I'd better find my fella. See you at the party?" "We'll think about it." Mandy said goodbye and started looking for her boyfriend. Sharon Jean looked at me again. "No," I said. "I've got work tomorrow." She nodded, not in agreement, but to acknowledge what I had said. There were 5 fights. The first was a complete joke. 2 pasty-looking dudes who looked like they'd never been inside a gym. They spent the whole first round kicking the air and throwing punches that never connected. When the crowd started booing and groaning, the so-called fighters put a little more effort into their game. When the bell rang, both were out of breath. "I can't believe I plucked my eyebrows for this," Sharon Jean said. "It wasn't my idea of a good time either. But I get it. People want a little fun and excitement. You try things. You're never sure what you don't like until you experience it." The second round started. The crowd went wild when one of the fighters actually landed a punch and got some points. The bar was set low by that time. The bell rang again, and the fight ended. The guy who landed the one punch was declared the winner by the MC referee. The fights were short, thank God. 2 5-minute rounds with maybe a 15-minute break in between bouts. I figured we could get back home before 10 at this rate. The fights got better. It must have been planned that way, to start weak and build to a climax. More punches made contact. There was lots of sweat and swearing, some awkward wrestling on the floor, and a little bit of blood. The crowd got pumped up. It was barbaric. I didn't see the attraction. They cleared the ring after each match to mop up the spit, blood, and sweat. The MC would return to the center of the ring and announce the next fight. Until finally, "This is our final bout for the night. It should be a pretty good fight. We have Derek Fleming." He pointed to a wiry-looking dude with a mohawk, a business major from the University of Kentucky, a member of the UFK kickboxing club. "Go Wildcats!" Derek yelled, loud enough to be heard through the mic. The MC turned and pointed to another guy with more meat on his bones. And Professor Randall Wayne Tackett, state wrestling champion, second Dan black belt in Taekwondo and black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The crowd had been restrained until this. Now they went nuts. I thought this Randall Wayne Tackett must be a popular guy. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Then it came to me. There was a billboard before you got into town with this guy and an older man, like a father and son team. They wore hard hats and smiled. They were handsome enough to be professional models. I had assumed they were. The text of the sign said, Tackett Cole, energy to burn. He's the guy on the billboard, I said to Sharon Jean. Yep, she said. Nothing special, just another horny boy. Do you know him? She nodded. He went to our high school. The bell rang to start the bout. The two men in the octagon touched gloves and started stalking each other. Never saw him in school. When did he graduate? 2 years before me. So I would have been in middle school. It occurred to me that I had seen Randall Wayne Tackett another time in real life. About 3 years before this, I had seen Sharon Jean talking with him at the county fair. I'd been wearing my hair short that summer because it was so hot. I wore a ball cap and a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big so my body could get ventilation. I walked up to them and said hi. He looked at me, smiled, and said to Sharon Jean, "Who's this, your kid brother?" I'd been mortified then. The memory came back and mortified me all over again. "I hope he gets his ass kicked," I said. Sharon Jean looked at me funny because I typically didn't talk like that. "Me too," she said. The fight was evenly matched, and both fighters seemed to know what they were doing. The guy with the mohawk may have had a broader range of techniques, but Randall Wayne looked in better shape. They almost went for the duration of the first round, with each of them landing punches. Derek managed to get a couple of kicks into Randall Wayne's legs, but it didn't slow him down. Then Derek kicked Randall Wayne's waist. Randall caught the kick, kicked Derek's supporting leg just behind the knee, and took him down to the mat. That was the beginning of the end. They grappled until Randall Wayne had Derek's neck in the crook of one knee. I found out later that this is called a triangle choke. They struggled for a while. When Derek realized there wasn't any getting out of it, he tapped the mat. The bell rang, and they got to their feet. That was interesting, I thought. I could see the appeal when you had a couple of fighters who knew what they were doing. The MC came in with the microphone, held Randall Wayne's hand up in the air, and announced him the winner. Everyone cheered. Randall Wayne took the microphone from the MC and said, "Party at my house!" And the crowd cheered even louder. People started filtering out, and Sharon Jean stood. "I want to go to the party," she said. "I have work tomorrow." "What time?" 11. "Then what's the problem? I'll get you home by midnight." I gave her a stern look, but I'm not assertive enough to pull that off. "You can spiral down into depression if you want," she said, "but do you have to drag me down with you?" She had skillfully shifted to a guilt trip strategy. "Fine," I said. "I wish I'd had a crystal ball."